Hi everyone, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to my garden. It looks a little different back here today, doesn't it? You'll notice that the bean arbor is gone. So we haven't had a frost yet, but we are this close, and the beans were finished producing, so we said let's take it down. And actually this gives me a moment to showcase this amazing Bulgarian giant leek. Isn't that huge? I have never grown any so tall, and they've got lots of stem on them for cutting. Yum! So today I wanted to cover some fall tasks that need to be done in the garden, at least here in my Zone 5B garden. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do is lift these geraniums, which are technically known as pelargoniums. They definitely will not survive a frost, and since they're out here in the open, that means I need to dig them up since we probably will have a frost tonight. Now, overwintering geraniums is easy as can be, so I'm going to show you how I do it. So I'm just going to gently explore around the perimeter of these geraniums and see if I can lift them up out of the soil. Look at this last one. Now that is a geranium plant. Here's a pink zonal geranium that I grew out in the garden. And I know it seems like a shame to dig them up now, but there is no way they'd make it through a frost. And I hate to just toss them at the end of the season because that's really a waste of money. So I use a specific type of overwintering method. I know some folks in some areas have been able to just bring in pots of their geraniums indoors and just put them in a light room and give them water every so often, and they get them through the winter just fine that way. I've got too many of these in order to do it. I can store them in a box in a very small area, and that works great for me. But like I tell everybody, do whatever method works best for you. So the first thing I need to do is to trim off any flower heads or flower buds because they're done with the flowering part. So I think that's everybody. I don't see any other, oh, missed one. I don't see any flower buds on here. And then the next thing I need to do, I'm making a bit of a mess here, but I'm just going to take a bucket and knock the soil off. You want the roots completely free of soil. Okay. So there's the first one. Here's that massive coral geranium that I pulled up. This is Americana coral, and it is really one of my favorites because the flowers are so bright. And I hate trimming off those little flower buds, but I've got to do it. Oops, there goes one. Okay, and then do I see any little clusters? Yep. So there's a little cluster of buds, and off it goes. Do I see any others? No. Yes, here's one. Okay, so those are all off of the plant. And then the same drill, this one actually I did a pretty good job of knocking the soil off as it was being pulled up. Okay, so that gives you an idea of the prep part. Now because I want the soil to completely dry and fall off of the roots of the plants, I'm moving them into my small unheated greenhouse just overnight. And then tomorrow I'll box them up. They will not get frosted in here because it's warm enough, even though, again, it's not heated, and they'll be protected from the temperatures. But tomorrow I'll show you how I store them for the winter months. Now while I'm in the greenhouse, I wanted to show you that I am curing my pumpkins and winter squash. So what I did was the thumbnail test first on all of these while they were still on the vines out in the garden. And if my thumbnail did not cut into the skin, that meant that it was ripe. Then I left a couple of inches of stem on each pumpkin and winter squash and brought them in here. They're just on sheets of newspaper. And so they are getting warmth and sunlight, but they're protected from the weather. I do this for 2 weeks, and that really hardens them off so they keep in storage for a really long time. You know, I learned this tip years ago from some friends, and it makes all the difference. So this is totally worth your time. Now, not everybody has a greenhouse, and I understand that, so you might consider putting them in a sunny porch or maybe in a carport if you can protect them from a frost, somewhere where they get a lot of sunlight and warmth, but they don't get frosted. Now out in the garden, Bill and I have been very busy for the last couple of days. We've been harvesting tender types of crops such as tomatoes and eggplants and melons because we know a frost is imminent and they are not going to survive it. So what we've left in the garden are things like turnips and carrots, rutabagas, lettuce, parsnips and carrots, Swiss chard. The leeks are okay, the celery will be okay, and everything else has been harvested. So on the tomato plants, we picked all of the large or almost full-size tomatoes, whether they were green or ripe, and we're ripening the green ones down in our basement in the dark. So these plants are basically done. I probably could just chop them down, but I don't have the heart to yet. This is where I planted garlic last week, so if you missed last week's video, be sure to catch it. But the garlic is going to grow all winter long through spring and into summer, and then we'll harvest them later in the summer. So everything that's in here right now is okay. You'll recall that we grew our potatoes in either large pots or cloth grow bags all summer long. And the traditional time to harvest them is when you get a good hard frost and the foliage of each potato plant is just brown as can be. Then you can harvest them. And that's always one of my favorite things to do because it's like digging for buried treasure. These are canna lilies and a particularly beautiful one called bronze leaf orange. Now they are also very tender, just like the geraniums, so there's no way they will survive our winter. But the interesting contrast to geraniums is that the canna lilies need to be frosted before you begin the overwintering process. Now, if I forget to do a video about this in the coming weeks, I wanted to let you know that on my YouTube channel, if you search for the word canna, C-A-N-N-A, you will find multiple videos on how to overwinter them. It's quite a similar process. And the great thing about overwintering canna lilies is that first of all, you save a lot of money. And second of all, you'll end up with more plants than what you started out with. I love that. Now in the fall, it's not a good idea to prune your roses if you live in a cold winter area like I do. That's because pruning will encourage tender new growth that is very susceptible to winter kill. But there is one exception, and I need to take advantage of that right now. Do you see this rose with all the crazy growth right next to our house? Well, that is Agatha Christie, and she is quite the overachiever. But being an overachiever is not so good during the winter months when we have these big windstorms. And I don't like the idea of those really long canes whipping around, potentially damaging the plant, breaking off in bad spots. And I also don't like the idea of them scraping across our window. So I need to prune those back. I've got my leather gloves on for some protection, thank heavens, because this rose has some doozies of thorns. Now I know that looks pretty brutal and I probably should have done it earlier, but this will save this plant from a lot of damage and the aggravation of listening to those thorns scraping across the window. That's freaky. Good morning. Well, it's not one day later, it's 2 days later because I had just a crazy busy day yesterday. But today I'm going to box up all of those geraniums that I prepared. I've got one big box here and a couple more set aside. And you can see that they look pretty sad, but it's okay. They're going to look a whole lot sadder. So I'm just going to carefully lower them into the box. Just layer them. And then once the box is full, I'm going to make sure I label the color on the outside because I do have more than one color. And by the time you're ready to pot them up in February, you will not be able to tell what's what by looking at them. Okay, this box is full, and so I'm just going to interlock the flaps. I don't want to seal it in any way because I do need a little bit of airflow. The next step is to move this to our basement, or if you have somewhere that's dark and cool, that would be good, like a closet. And then I'm going to mark my calendar to check on these once a month. That's because I want to make sure there's no rotting going on. Now, to be honest, in all the years I've been doing this, I've never had that happen, but you just never know. And if you did see rot, you would either trim off the part that was rotting or remove the plant completely so that it doesn't spread. But it's very unlikely you'll have that happen. Now, every time that you check on them, you are going to think they look as dead as can be, but it's highly unlikely that they are. If you do see that the branches and stems look really shrivelly, you can do a very light misting of water, and I mean very light. But generally you shouldn't have to do that. They're going to look really sad, but by the time February gets here, you should see some new leaves coming out, and it's just amazing to me. Now in February, that's when you get to pot them up. And you let them grow for a little bit in a sunny area like inside your sliding glass door or some other light area. And then after they have some good growth, then you're going to prune them a bit to make them more compact. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. You know, the fall is such a beautiful time of year, and I know we're all bummed that the end of the gardening season is essentially here, but let's make a pact to enjoy every day of it. Right now we've got this gorgeous blue sky, lots of sunshine. I'm starting to see some things turn color. I'm having fun decorating my front porch, and so I'm making the most of every single day. I'll see you next week. Take care.